Cinderella. We all know the story, right? The pumpkin coach, the fairy godmother, that midnight deadline. It's one of those tales that just feels foundational. It's a classic story of magical transformation and, finding your prince. But what if the version we all know and love is actually a cleaned up, sanitized rewrite of something way, way darker? What if the key to winning the prince wasn't about a perfect fit, but about a gruesome act of self-mutilation? Okay, we're going to get into this because the original story is a world away from the fairy tale we think we know. So, first things first, let's just quickly set the scene with the version that's become the one everybody recognizes. This is the tale of whimsical magic, where help just kind of shows up in a burst of sparkles and everything works out in the end. You know all the classic ingredients. You got the poor, miserable girl, the truly awful step family, and then that magical intervention that gives her one perfect night out. It all leads to that famous lost slipper and, of course, the perfect happily ever after. It's a nice, clean, romantic story. But here's what's really important to notice: the kind of magic we're talking about here. In this popular version, the magic is totally external. It's flashy, and this is the big one, it's temporary. It's basically a gift, a spell that comes with a very clear expiration date. I mean, think about how it all goes down. A fairy godmother just pops up out of nowhere, a pumpkin turns into a coach, a few mice become horses. It's all incredibly imaginative. But that ticking clock, the stroke of midnight, that's where all the drama comes from. The whole thing is a race against time before the illusion completely falls apart. Okay, so now that we've refreshed our memory on the familiar version, let's pull back the curtain. We're about to dive into a much older, much more brutal version of the story, the one collected by the Brothers Grimm. And this is where things get, well, pretty grim. So the first huge difference is where the magic actually comes from. Forget the fairy godmother with the wand. In the Grimm version, Cinderella's power comes from a hazel tree she plants on her mother's grave, a tree she waters with her own tears. The magic here isn't some fun, whimsical gift. It's earned through her grief, her devotion, and this deep connection to her dead mother. It's natural, it's ancestral, and it's just so much sadder. And get this, it wasn't just one ball. The Grimm story has a 3-day festival. Each day, Cinderella goes to her mother's grave, and a magical bird in that hazel tree throws down an even more beautiful dress for her. So this isn't a one-time thing. It's a sustained effort over 3 nights, which is how she and the prince actually build a connection. It's only on the 3rd night that she finally loses that famous slipper, which, by the way, was made of solid gold, not glass. Now, this all leads to the slipper test, and this is where the story takes a really, really dark turn. When the prince shows up with the golden slipper, the first stepsister's foot is too big. So her mother just hands her a knife and says this. I mean, there's no magic here, just pure, brutal, bloody ambition. And the girl actually does it. She cuts off her own toe to make the shoe fit. But she doesn't get away with it. As the prince is riding off with his supposed new bride, those magical pigeons from the hazel tree call out and expose the whole lie. They're like the guardians of truth in this story, and they immediately tip off the prince about the blood pouring out of the shoe. And the exact same thing happens with the second sister, except she cuts off a piece of her heel. And that brings us to the absolutely shocking ending. The justice in the Grimm tale is not subtle at all. At Cinderella's wedding, the 2 false sisters show up, probably hoping to get in on her good fortune, but the pigeons from the tree fly down and peck out both of their eyes, blinding them as punishment for their wickedness. There is no forgiveness here. There is only harsh, violent eye-for-an-eye retribution. So, wow, we have 2 wildly different versions of the same story. One is all about gentle magic, the other is about brutal justice. But what if, for all their differences, they're both sending a kind of similar message about a woman's place in the world? To understand that, we've got to look at the story through a more critical lens. So to help frame this critique, we first have to understand a key concept that the analysis uses: patriarchy. The source defines it as a system where male-dominated structures end up creating social arrangements that can oppress women. Now, this idea is really central to the critique of how the story ends. Okay, so from this perspective, the argument breaks down like this. The story, no matter which version you're looking at, pushes this damsel in distress idea. Cinderella's salvation doesn't come from her own intelligence or strength. It comes from marrying a powerful man. And the prince himself, he's completely captivated by how she looks, and that's it. He never even bothers to ask for her name. The whole thing is based on objectification, not a real connection. The analysis then goes even deeper, pulling in this huge question from the philosopher Simone de Beauvoir. What is a woman? It's this profound question that's used to challenge how society defines and, limits women. So, what answer does the Cinderella story give us? And according to this critical reading, the answer is, well, it's pretty unsettling. The story basically implies that a woman is a passive person, someone whose whole purpose is to be beautiful and to, wait, she waits for some Prince Charming to come rescue her from all her problems and give her life meaning. In essence, the narrative really doubles down on this idea of female dependency. So we've seen the sweet version, we've seen the brutal version, and we've looked at a critical analysis. But why does any of this even matter? I mean, why are we spending so much time picking apart a children's story? Well, because these tales are so much more than just entertainment. Let's just put them side by side one last time. In one corner, you have a story of pure romantic fantasy, where magic is just this easy, whimsical gift. And in the other, you have this harsh tale of eye for an eye justice, where power comes from nature and from grief. They're two totally different stories with totally different worldviews, just sharing the same name. And that gets us to the real heart of it. Fairy tales aren't timeless in the way we usually think. They're more like cultural artifacts, like old pottery or tools. They're basically mirrors that reflect the societies that told them, what they believed about justice, their ideas about gender, what they were afraid of, and what they hoped for. Which kind of leaves us with this one final thought. The fact that we, as a culture, overwhelmingly prefer the version with the fairy godmother over the one with the bloody shoe and the vengeful birds, that says something about us. It really makes you wonder, what do the stories we choose to tell our children and ourselves really reveal about who we are today?